The desperate plea on a planet far from Earth. The aliens were in a state of desperation. Their world was dying. The once beautiful cities were in ruins, the air thick with smoke and dust. The sky had turned a dull, lifeless gray. An enemy, much stronger and more powerful, had attacked without mercy. The alien race had fought back with everything they had, but it was never enough. Every day, more of their people disappeared, and their hope grew dimmer. The alien leader, a wise and calm figure named Zarek, stood at the head of the council. His face was grave as he looked out over the barren land. His people had done everything they could to survive, but the enemy was relentless. He could see the fear in the eyes of his fellow leaders. They knew deep down that their time was running out. "We cannot keep fighting like this," Zarek said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Our world is breaking apart. Our people are dying." The council members were silent, each one struggling with the terrible truth. There were no more options, no more ways to win. Their once proud civilization was slipping through their fingers, and they needed help desperately. But from where? "We must send a message," Zarek declared. "If there is even the smallest chance for us to survive, we must reach out to the humans." The council gasped. The humans were known throughout the galaxy, but they had never been involved in the alien war. They were a strange species, fierce and unpredictable. Some said they were brutal warriors, while others claimed they were peaceful explorers. No one really knew what to expect from them. "They might be our only hope," Zarek continued. "We have heard whispers that humans are capable of great power and they have fought wars of their own. If we can send them a message, perhaps they will listen." The council was divided. Some were afraid. They feared that reaching out to the humans would only bring more destruction. But Zarek's voice was firm. "If we do nothing, we are doomed." He said, "This is our last chance." After much debate, the council agreed. They would send a message of plea for help directly to Earth. It was a risky move, but there was no other choice. They had to try. Zarek gave the order, and within hours, the message was prepared. The transmission was simple, yet filled with urgency. It spoke of the alien world's desperate plight, the deaths of their people, and the destruction of their cities. It begged the humans to send aid, any form of help, even if it meant only sending a ship to evacuate their people. Zarek hoped the humans would hear their cry for help and respond with compassion. The message was sent through the vastness of space, traveling millions of miles in the hope that someone on Earth would hear it. It was a fragile hope, but it was all they had left as the transmission disappeared into the stars. Zarek felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. He knew that if the humans chose to ignore their plea, there would be no future for his people. But if they answered, if they reached out, it could change everything. The days passed slowly. The alien world waited in silence, their fate hanging in the balance. Zarek walked the ruins of the once great city, his mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. Would the humans answer their call? Or would they abandon them just like everyone else had? His heart pounded as he thought about the possibility of a human response. What would it be? Would they come as allies, or would they bring their wrath? Upon the alien world, there were so many questions, so many unknowns. Zarek could only wait and pray. Then, on the third day after the message was sent, a signal came. It was a faint signal at first, just a blip on their radar. But then, as the hours passed, it became clearer. It was a response. Zarek stood in the command center, staring at the screen in disbelief. The message was coming from Earth. "We have received your plea," the message said. "We will send aid." Zarek's heart skipped a beat. The humans had heard them. They were coming. But there was something in the tone of the message that sent a chill through him. It wasn't the comforting, reassuring message he had hoped for. It was direct, cold, and businesslike. There was no promise of peace, no words of sympathy. Just the simple message, "We will send aid." The council gathered once again, and Zarek relayed the message. The aliens felt a spark of hope, but fear was still in the air. What kind of aid would the humans send? Would they come with the power to save them, or would they come with destruction in mind? Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, and he wasn't sure if it would be for better or for worse. The fate of his people now rested in the hands of the humans. They had begged for help, and now the humans had responded. The only question that remained was, what kind of help would they bring? The humans' response: the aliens sat in their command center, their eyes glued to the screens, waiting. They had sent their plea for help across the vast reaches of space. But now, the endless silence seemed to stretch on forever. The hours felt like days, and with each passing moment, their hope began to flicker. What if the humans had ignored them? What if their message had been lost forever in the deep void of space? Zarek paced back and forth, his mind racing with thoughts of what could come next. His people had already suffered so much, and the weight of their fate rested heavily on his shoulders. His every step echoed in the stillness of the command center, a stark reminder that time was slipping away. Then, without warning, the stillness was shattered. A loud beep filled the room, followed by the sudden flash of lights on the communication screen. The aliens jumped to their feet, their eyes widening in disbelief. The message they had been waiting for had arrived. Zarek approached the console, his hands shaking. He could feel his heart racing in his chest as he read the words on the screen. The response was short, but to the point. "We have received your plea. We will send aid." At first, there was a collective sigh of relief. They had been heard. The humans were coming to help them. But as Zarek read the message again, he felt a sense of unease. Something about it didn't sit right with him. The tone was too cold, too clinical. It wasn't the kind of message a friend would send, nor was it the warmth they had hoped for. "We will send aid," the humans had said, but there was no mention of peace, no promise of safety. Zarek's instincts screamed that this wasn't going to be the kind of rescue they had imagined. What kind of aid would the humans send? Would it be the salvation they so desperately needed? Or would it be something more ominous? The aliens gathered around the console, their faces filled with uncertainty. The message had been delivered with a chilling calm, like a machine offering a solution without any concern for the cost. What had they truly signed up for? "What does this mean?" asked Illyra, one of the younger council members, her voice shaking. "Did they hear our cries? Will they come with the compassion we need?" Zarek didn't have the answers. He stared at the screen, his brow furrowed in thought. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, the fate of his entire species hanging in the balance. There was no going back now. The humans were coming. "We've been heard," Zarek said, his voice low and heavy. "But we don't know what kind of help they'll bring. We'll just have to wait and see." The room fell silent again, the alien leaders lost in their own thoughts. What kind of help would the humans send? Would it be the solution they so desperately needed, or would it be the end of everything they had fought for? As the hours passed, the tension grew. The warship that the humans promised to send hadn't arrived yet. But Zarek could feel its approach, its massive power looming. In the distance, it wasn't just a ship. It was something else, something built for destruction. Yet, there was something strangely reassuring about its power. Maybe that was what the aliens needed. After all, something powerful enough to fight back the enemies that had destroyed their world. But as the minutes ticked by, Zarek couldn't help but wonder if the humans were truly coming to help, or if they had something entirely different in mind. He had asked for salvation, but was it truly salvation that was on its way? Or would it be something darker, something that would change everything? Then, Finally, the moment came. The massive shadow of a warship appeared on the horizon. It was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Its dark, imposing form blocked out the stars, and its engines hummed with a terrible power. Zarek's heart skipped a beat as the warship drew closer, its guns and weapons visible in the harsh light of the dying sun. The ship was enormous, easily capable of turning the tide of any battle. But this wasn't a battle the aliens were fighting. This wasn't what they had expected. They had pleaded for help, but what had they received in return? Zarek stood in awe and fear, watching the ship grow larger as it approached. The humans had sent this thing, and now it was coming to their world, its presence filling the air with tension. What would happen when the warship landed? What kind of aid would they offer? The questions swirled in Zarek's mind, each one more terrifying than the last. But there was no turning back now. The humans had heard their cry. And now they were here, bringing something neither Zarek nor his people could ever have imagined. The warship approaches the ground trembled as the massive warship drew closer, its shadow casting an eerie darkness over the alien world. The sky seemed to darken further, as if the very air itself recoiled from the arrival of such a terrifying force. Zarek stood atop a hill overlooking the desolate landscape, his gaze fixed on the approaching vessel. His people, once proud and strong, now cowered beneath its immense power. The warship was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, black, and almost metallic, reflecting no light. It had no wings, no visible means of propulsion. It simply hovered, defying the laws of physics. The ground shook with each passing moment as the warship moved closer, its engines humming with an unnatural, chilling sound. The sound seemed to pierce through the very bones of the alien leaders, sending a shiver down their spines. "What is that?" whispered Illyra, barely able to keep her voice steady. "Is that the ship they promised us?" Zarek didn't answer immediately. He was too lost in the sight of it. The ship wasn't a symbol of hope. It was a harbinger of something far more uncertain, and as it loomed ever larger, Zarek's gut twisted in fear. It wasn't the kind of help he had imagined when he first sent the message. "Keep steady," Zarek said, though his voice faltered slightly. "This is what we've been given. We must face it." As the warship descended toward their planet's surface, it released a shockwave, causing the alien buildings to shudder and the sky to flicker with electrical energy. The atmosphere was charged, as though the ship itself was altering the very fabric of the world around them. It didn't feel like a rescue mission. It felt like a reckoning. Zarek's eyes narrowed as he watched the ship finally land, its dark form blocking out the sun entirely. The ground around it cracked, and the air seemed to thicken, the tension palpable. The ship settled with a soft thud, almost imperceptible to the eye, but heavy in its impact. The silence that followed was deafening. The aliens stood in awe, too, fearful to speak. Moments passed before anything happened. No doors opened, no communications were made. Just a dead, heavy silence hung over the alien world. Zarek's heart raced. He had expected a welcoming sign, a promise of alliance, or at least a declaration of intentions. But there was nothing, only the oppressive weight of the warship's presence. Then, suddenly, a deep, booming voice filled the air. It wasn't a human voice. It was something else. Something that seemed to vibrate the very core of the planet. "Prepare yourselves," the voice rumbled. "Your survival depends on your strength. The warship is here not to protect, but to teach you how to protect yourselves." Zarek's blood ran cold. This was no rescue mission, no help in the form he had imagined. The humans weren't here to save them. They were here to force them to fight, to teach them how to survive by using the very power of destruction they had feared. The voice paused, then continued in a harsh tone. Your enemies will not wait. For you to learn, you will be tested. You will fight. The warship will guide you, but the battle is yours to win. The words echoed through the alien ranks, and for the first time, Zarek felt a cold realization sink in. The humans hadn't sent a fleet of saviors. They had sent a weapon A training ground for war. They had sent the very thing that would transform the aliens into warriors, whether they were ready or not. There was no comfort in this. No easy path to peace. The warship wasn't here to take them away from their dying world. It was here to force them to stand up and fight. The only question now was whether they had the strength to survive the training that was about to begin. Zarek's thoughts raced. How could his people, so used to peace, endure the harsh reality the humans were about to impose on them? They were not soldiers. They were not warriors. They were a species on the brink of extinction. But now it seemed their only hope for survival was to learn to fight. The doors of the warship began to open, and from within, soldiers, humans, tall and imposing, began to emerge, each one dressed in heavy armor. Their faces were unreadable, their movements swift and purposeful. They carried weapons the aliens had never seen before, strange and terrifying in their design. Zarek's heart pounded in his chest as the soldiers marched toward them. They were not here to comfort or to guide. They were here to transform his people into something new, something different, something powerful. Are we truly ready for this? Zarek muttered to himself, his eyes locked on the human soldiers. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was no turning back now. The warship had arrived, and with it, a new chapter of their survival. Whether they were ready or not, the aliens would face the tests ahead. Their world's fate no longer rested in the hands of their enemies. It now rested in their own, the truth behind the warship. Warship loomed ominously above the alien leaders, its presence casting a long, heavy shadow over the landscape. The strange, harsh voice that had boomed across the air left the aliens in stunned silence. The humans weren't here to save them from their enemies. They were here to train them to fight, to teach them how to survive by their own strength. Zarek stood at the front of the council, his mind racing with the weight of the truth he had just learned. The words echoed in his mind, "Your survival depends on your strength." It was a call to arms, but not in the way Zarek had imagined. He had thought the humans would come with compassion, ready to provide sanctuary or resources. Instead, they had sent a weapon. I thought they would come with peace. Alira whispered beside him, her voice trembling. This isn't peace. This is war. Zarek could only nod. He shared her fear, her confusion. The message was clear. But it was unlike anything they had expected. The humans were not interested in providing comfort or sympathy. They had come to teach them how to fight for their survival, to use the power of destruction to save themselves. The warship was not a gift. It was a tool. As the first human soldiers marched off the warship, the alien leaders felt their stomachs twist in anxiety. The humans were powerful, their movements swift and confident. Each one carried a weapon and advanced piece of technology the aliens had never seen before. It hummed with energy, sharp edges gleaming in the light. Then a human stepped forward, his dark eyes cold and calculating. He was taller than any alien, his armor a sleek black that shimmered with an almost eerie glow. He held up his hand, and the other soldiers stopped, turning to face him. "We are here to prepare you for what's to come," the human said, his voice calm and commanding. "You will learn to fight. You will learn to survive. But there are no easy paths. There are no guarantees." The words hit the aliens like a sudden blow. Zarek felt the weight of them settling deep in his chest. There would be no mercy, no easy way out. If they wanted to survive, they would have to fight, too. Learn to wield the power that the humans brought with them. This wasn't a rescue mission, which is a transformation. Do you think your enemies will wait for you to learn? The human continued, his eyes scanning the alien leaders. No. They will continue to attack, to destroy. You must become strong. Enough to fight back. You must take your survival into your own hands. Zarek's mind raced. What kind of people were the humans? They didn't seem interested in diplomacy or peaceful resolution. They were warriors, pure and simple. They had come to prepare the aliens for war, to turn them into soldiers just like themselves. The alien council stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Zarek's heart weighed heavy with the realization that his people were now bound to the humans. Will, the warship had not brought salvation, it had brought a challenge. A challenge to become more than what they were, to adapt to a new way of life that was filled with combat, danger, and the constant threat of death. But as much as Zarek wanted to resist, he knew there was no choice. His people had begged for help, and now the humans had given them exactly what they needed: an opportunity to survive. But it was not a gift. It was a trial, and only the strong would survive. Zarek took a deep breath, gathering his courage. He knew he couldn't back down now. His people needed him to lead them through this. There was no turning back. They had been given a chance, and he would make sure they took it. He turned to the council. "We cannot shrink from this," he said firmly. "The humans have given us a path to survival. We must walk it, even if it leads us into battle." The council exchanged uneasy glances, but one by one, they nodded in agreement. There was no other choice. The humans had made it clear. They would not offer them refuge or comfort. They would only offer the tools to fight back. The aliens would either learn to fight, or they would perish. The human soldier stepped forward again, his eyes locking onto Zarek's. "You'll learn quickly," he said coldly. "Because if you don't, you won't survive." Zarek felt the weight of those words sink in. This was no longer just a war for survival against their enemies. This was a war for their very way of life. The aliens would have to adapt or face extinction. The truth had become clear. There was no easy path, no safety. They had been handed the means to fight, and now it was up to them to take it. The warship's engines roared, signaling that the real battle was about to begin. The aliens would either rise to the challenge or fall before it. Zarek's gaze hardened as he looked at the human soldiers, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The training begins. The aliens had never known training like this. From the moment the human soldiers stepped off the warship, the alien leaders understood that their peaceful lives would never return. What began as a fleeting hope for survival quickly turned into a grueling lesson in combat, strategy, and sheer willpower. The aliens were no longer civilians. They were soldiers in the making, and the humans had come to shape them into warriors. Zarek watched as the human commanders took charge, their voices sharp and clear. They wasted no time. Within hours, the aliens were learning to use weapons they had never seen before, blasters that hummed with an energy unlike anything from their world. The training fields were set up, and the soldiers began their drills. Each alien was assigned a human instructor who barked orders with a cold efficiency that made Zarek's stomach turn. The humans did not care for pleasantries. They cared only for results. Zarek had no time to adjust. Every day was a new challenge, a new test of endurance. The once peaceful alien species was thrust into brutal drills that stretched their bodies and minds beyond their limits. The sounds of explosions, gunfire, and the clash of weapons filled the air as the alien soldiers fought through the exercises. It was more than physical strain. It was a test of spirit, of whether they could hold onto their humanity in the face of such raw aggression. Zarek was the first to join the training. He had always been a leader of peace, of diplomacy. But now, his leadership would be tested in ways he never imagined. The humans didn't care for words or strategies of peace. They cared for action and survival. The first lesson was simple: survive or die trying. He lifted the blaster in his hands, unsure of how it worked. It was heavy, unfamiliar. His first shot missed, a simple target at only 20 meters. His instructor, a tall human with dark hair, showed no sign of approval. "You won't survive by missing," the human snapped. "Take the shot. Don't hesitate." Zarek tightened his grip on the weapon, his fingers trembling. It wasn't fear, it was uncertainty. The knowledge that this weapon could kill, that he could kill with it. He steadied himself, focusing on the target ahead, and fired again. This time, the shot hit. It was a small victory, but it felt like a mountain. Conquered. For the first time, Zarek understood what the humans meant by survival. But the training didn't stop there. There were hand-to-hand combat drills where the aliens learned to fight without weapons. The humans showed no mercy, pushing them until their muscles burned and their bodies ached. At first, the aliens resisted. They were not trained for such brutality. But soon, they realized that the humans' way was the only way. Elira, Zarek's close ally, was pushed to her breaking point during a sparring match. She was smaller than most of the human soldiers, but her determination was fierce. She refused to back down, even as the human instructor took advantage of her size and strength. The human's fighting style was brutal, direct, and fast. Every punch, every kick was calculated to inflict the maximum amount of damage. There was no room for hesitation. Elira fell to the ground, winded, but her eyes were filled with a fire that hadn't been there before. Again she panted, climbing to her feet. Her human instructor raised an eyebrow, impressed by her resolve. "Again," he said, and they began again. Every alien in the camp was subjected to the same treatment. The humans cared not for their past. They only cared about their future, about making the aliens capable of surviving the oncoming battles. The once gentle species was being molded into something else, something strong, something dangerous. The warship that had arrived wasn't just a symbol of their help. It was their crucible, forging them into the warriors they needed to become. Zarek watched as Elira and the others pushed themselves beyond their limits, their bodies broken, but their spirits unyielding. There was no time for weakness. There was no time for doubt. They had been given a chance to fight back, to survive, but only if they could endure the training. Only if they could face the harshness of this new world and rise above it. And then, the humans dropped the final bombshell. "You will fight each other." The announcement sent a ripple of shock through the alien ranks. They had been training together, helping each other, working as a unit. Now, they were being told to fight against one another, to prove they were worthy of survival. Zarek felt a knot form in his stomach. The lessons were not just about learning to fight. They were about learning who was strongest, who was most willing to kill in order to survive. The first match was set up early the next morning. Zarek, Elira, and the others watched in silence. As two alien soldiers were chosen to fight, the rules were simple: survive or be eliminated. There was no mercy. There was no compassion. Zarek wanted to protest, to speak out against this. But as he watched the match unfold, he understood. The humans weren't teaching cruelty. They were teaching reality. The galaxy wasn't kind. If they wanted to survive, they had to embrace the fight, not shrink from it as the training continued. Zarek realized that the line between survival and death was razor thin. The humans hadn't sent a warship to save them. They had sent a warship to teach them the hardest lesson of all. Only the strong survive, and the weak are left behind. The turning point that days blended into each other, the constant grind of training wearing down the spirits of the aliens, but also slowly forging them into something unrecognizable. Zarek watched as his people began to change, some for the better, some for the worse. The alien world was still in ruin, their cities crumbling, their hope faltering. Yet there was a new fire burning in the eyes of those who survived the grueling training. The Warship, once seen as a vessel of dread, had now become their forge, shaping them into fighters. One brutal lesson at a time, Zarek had come to terms with his role. The days of leading with diplomacy and peace were over. He was now a leader of warriors, and this new reality was carved into his soul. He had seen his people rise and fall in the training sessions, each defeat a bitter pill, each victory a hard-earned triumph. But one thing was certain: the training was working. They were learning to fight. One morning, as the first rays of light broke through the ever-present haze that hung over their world, the humans gave the aliens their first real test. It wasn't just a drill. It wasn't just a fight between soldiers. This was the moment they had been preparing for. A real enemy had been spotted, a force advancing on their planet from the edge of the galaxy, a merciless army with no interest in peace. The humans had heard of it, and now they were ready to fight. The aliens were ready, too, or so they hoped. Zarek felt a tightness in his chest as the announcement came over the loudspeakers. The first real battle would begin in a matter of hours. His people would be the first line of defense, and their training would be put to the ultimate test. The human commander would become a constant figure in their lives, gave them one final piece of advice before the battle began. His words were as cold and calculated as ever. "You've been trained. You know what to do. No one is coming to save you. This is your fight." Zarek stood at the front of the makeshift army, looking at his people. Many of them were unrecognizable. Their faces were harder, their postures straighter, and their eyes filled with a determination that hadn't been there before. There was no room for hesitation now. They were fighters. The aliens had been reborn in the flames of war, and the moment had finally come to see if they could survive. The humans weren't leading the charge. Instead, they hovered above in their warship, watching from a distance as the alien forces gathered. Zarek's heart pounded in his chest. His people were not only fighting for their world, they were fighting for the chance to prove themselves to the humans, to prove they could survive, to prove they could be strong. The alien forces marched to the battlefield with a rhythm that was still foreign to them. The sound of their boots, heavy and deliberate, echoed through the shattered city streets as they moved forward. Zarek's mind raced. He had never imagined his people would ever be in a position like this. But here they were, on the verge of a battle that could decide everything. Then the first attack came. A wave of enemy fighters surged across the horizon, descending upon them with terrifying speed. They were ruthless, their weapons flashing in the sunlight as they charged. The aliens didn't hesitate. They had been trained to fight, to react without thinking, to survive. Zarek was the first to raise his weapon. The blast of his blaster felt different. Now it was no longer an alien tool in his hand. It was an extension of himself, a weapon he had learned to wield with deadly precision. He fired. And for the first time since the humans arrived, he felt the rush of power that came with the act of survival. The enemy forces crashed against them like a tidal wave. But the aliens stood firm, their newly forged skills guiding their every move. Zarek watched as his people fought with a ferocity he hadn't thought possible. They were no longer just trying to survive. They were fighting with purpose. They were fighting to prove they were worthy of this second chance. But it wasn't just about their survival. It was about proving to the humans that they had made the right choice in sending the warship. Zarek felt the weight of that expectation on his shoulders as he fired again, taking down an enemy fighter in one clean shot. His heart raced, but there was no time to think about fear. The battle was too fierce, too intense, and he had to keep fighting. The tide of the battle shifted back and forth, the aliens pushing the enemy forces back, only to have them regroup and retaliate with even more power. Zarek saw Alira in the midst of the chaos, her movements swift and graceful, each blow landing with lethal accuracy. She had become something else entirely, true warrior, not just a survivor. Hours passed and the battle raged on. The sky above the battlefield was thick with smoke, the ground trembling with the force of constant explosions. Zarek's arms ached from the constant firing, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His people were depending on him. And as the enemy forces finally began to retreat, Zarek realized something profound. They had done it. They had fought back, and they had survived. The aliens had won their first battle. It wasn't a victory of triumph and glory, it was a victory of survival, of proving to themselves and to the humans that they were no longer weak. They had faced the enemy head-on and come out on top. But as Zarek stood in the aftermath, his body bruised and exhausted, he knew this was only the beginning. There were more battles ahead, and the true test of their strength was yet to come. The warship had given them the tools, but it was up to them to carry on. The turning point had arrived. They had passed their first trial, but now they would need everything they had learned to face the war that still loomed on the horizon. A new dawn, the battlefield was silent, save for the soft hum of the warship in the distance. The air was thick with smoke, the ground scorched and torn apart by the intensity of the fight. Alien bodies lay scattered across the field, some of them still, others twitching in the aftermath of battle. But among the wreckage, there was one undeniable truth: the aliens had won their first battle. Zarek stood at the edge of the battlefield, staring out across the carnage. His armor was battered, his weapon still gripped tightly in his hand. His chest heaved with each breath, but his heart beat steady. The battle had been fierce, the odds stacked against them, but they had fought with a fire they never knew they had. And now they were the victors. Alira stood beside him, her face smeared with dirt and blood, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made Zarek pause. She had changed. All of them had. The peaceful aliens they once were, the people who had cringed at the thought of violence, had been transformed into warriors. Not just warriors for survival, but warriors who now understood what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. "We did it," Alira said, her voice low, but filled with awe. "We actually did it." Zarek nodded, but his gaze didn't leave the horizon. The humans had watched from their warship, observing their every move. It was unclear what they thought of their success, or if they would even acknowledge it. But Zarek knew one thing: this victory wasn't just for his people, it was for the humans as well. They had given the aliens the tools, the training, and the opportunity to survive. But it was the aliens themselves who had fought, who had stepped up when it mattered most. This victory belonged to them, as the alien soldiers began to regroup. Their faces weary but determined, Zarek took a step forward, his voice rising above the rest. "This battle is only the beginning," he said, his tone firm, yet filled with an undeniable pride. "We have proven that we can fight, that we can survive. But this is just the start. We must continue to fight, to grow stronger. The war is not over, and neither are our struggles." There was a murmur of agreement among the soldiers. They had fought together, and they would continue to fight together. Zarek turned to face the warship, which still hovered high above the planet, its engines humming in the silence. The humans had given them this chance. They had not fought the battle for them, but they had shown them the way. He glanced at the sky, where the first stars of the evening were beginning to twinkle faintly. The sun had set, but in its absence, a new light was born. The light of hope, the light of determination. The aliens, once on the brink of extinction, were now standing tall. "This is our world," Zarek declared, his voice unwavering. We will defend it, not just for ourselves, but for everything we are. We are not pawns in someone else's game. We are not victims of fate. We are warriors, and we will take our place in the galaxy on our own terms. As his words echoed through the alien ranks, a new sense of unity swept over the soldiers. The fear that had once gripped them was gone, replaced by something much stronger. Purpose. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting for their future, for their right to exist. They weren't just defending their world. They were claiming it as their own. The warship above began to slowly descend, and the human soldiers disembarked, their expressions unreadable as they observed the aftermath. Zarek stepped forward to meet them, the weight of their shared history heavy in the air. "We have proven ourselves," Zarek said to the human commander, his voice steady. "But this victory is just the beginning. We are ready for the challenges ahead." The human commander studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You have exceeded expectations. Your people fought with strength and resolve. We will continue to train you, but now you stand as equals in this war. We are no longer the ones leading you. You've earned your place." Zarek stood taller than he had ever stood before. This moment, this acknowledgement, meant more than any victory or battle. It meant that the aliens were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. They were no longer at the mercy of their enemies or even the humans. They had taken control of their destiny as the alien soldiers celebrated their hard-fought victory. Zarek's thoughts wandered to the future. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, but the aliens had found their strength. They had found their purpose. The dawn had come, not just for their world, but for their people. The war was far from over, but the aliens had learned something invaluable. In the harshest of circumstances, they had learned how to fight, how to survive, and most importantly, how to rise from the ashes and create a future of their own choosing. And so, with the stars shining above and the warship retreating into the distance, Zarek looked out over the horizon, a sense of pride and resolve swelling within him. Their journey had just begun, and no matter what came next, he knew one thing for certain: the aliens would never again be the same.